One of the most powerful voices in gospel music has just gone silent for good. Della Reid, the legendary choir director whose anointing shaped entire generations, has passed away at the age of 94. But what she left behind goes far beyond just music. It's a legacy wrapped in glory, struggle, and hidden truths that were never meant to reach your ears. Stick with us, because what we're about to reveal will shake you to your very core. The gospel world is grieving. The pews sit in silence, choirs are hushed, and today, the organ keys seem to linger in their rest a little longer because a true matriarch of gospel, has finally gone home. Della Reid, the driving force behind some of the most powerful gospel choir arrangements ever heard, has died at 94. But this isn't only a story about her passing. This is a celebration of a woman whose life went far beyond the choir loft, whose reach stretched from the church pews of Chicago to the grand stages of international gospel festivals. She wasn't just leading choirs, she was shaping atmospheres, summoning the spirit with the lift of her hand and the fire in her voice. In the next few minutes, we're going to take a deep look at her incredible journey from being a preacher's daughter to becoming gospel royalty. We'll uncover the hidden stories of how she carved out her space in a male-dominated world, how she helped define the Chicago gospel sound, mentored future icons, and why her legacy still carries truths the traditional church never wanted spoken out loud.
Believe me, you won't want to miss what's coming, because Della's story isn't just history, it's a movement. And her death marks the close of an era that many tried to suppress but never could. So whether you once sang under her direction or you're just now discovering who she was, this video will reveal a world of gospel brilliance you didn't even know you were missing. The world knew her name. But before the robes, the choirs, and the thunderous amens, Della Reid was simply a little girl with a voice, raised in a household already drenched in gospel. Born in 1930, Della was the daughter of none other than Reverend Clay Evans, himself a gospel giant. A pastor, singer, and civil rights leader, she grew up on the vibrant south side of Chicago during a time when gospel music was just beginning to define the heartbeat of Black America. Back then, church wasn't just part of life, it was life. The organ wasn't merely an instrument, it was the pulse of the neighborhood. From the moment she could stand, Della was right there in the choir stand beside her father, soaking in every key change, every melodic lift, every cry of praise. But she never wanted to just sing. Even as a child, she had a sharp musical ear and a strong presence. People noticed how she could rearrange harmonies in her head, how she always knew instinctively what part was missing. That talent only grew. By her teenage years, Della was already transforming traditional hymns, breathing fresh fire into old songs, and directing choirs at an age when most young girls weren't even handed a microphone. But her rise didn't come without challenges. A woman navigating a man's world, that's what Della Reid represented during the 1950s and 60s, when gospel music was firmly ruled by men. Male preachers, male directors, male lead singers, the stage was theirs. Women, meanwhile, were expected to follow quietly. But Della Reid, she wasn't made to follow anyone. She was a trailblazer, boldly gifted, unshakably confident, and never afraid to lead. And lead she most certainly did. She began her directing journey at her father's church, Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church, a place that would eventually become inseparable from the Chicago gospel sound. It was there she transformed choirs into vocal forces, not with flashy gimmicks, but through discipline, passion, and spirit-driven excellence. Della brought a fearless boldness to gospel arrangements, a kind of fire the genre hadn't quite seen before. Her hands didn't simply move, they commanded attention. Her presence didn't just uplift, it altered the room. And as her influence expanded, so did the call for her voice, her vision, and her guidance. But this is where things begin to take a different turn. Della wasn't only creating music. She was building a legacy, one strong enough to carry her family, her church, and her city straight into the history books of gospel. Coming up, we'll dive into how she became the backbone of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church's iconic choirs, standing shoulder to shoulder with her father, and even pushing him musically in ways few dared. But here's what many never realized. Some in the gospel world tried to shrink her impact. She wasn't a man. And because she didn't chase the spotlight, some overlooked her. But behind closed doors, Della was the pulse. If the walls of Fellowship Missionary Baptist could speak, they echo the tale of a musical movement, birthed in worship and shaped by a woman whose voice shattered chains and opened heavens, all while her father, Reverend Clay Evans, stood as the fire behind the pulpit. Yet it was Della Evans, Reid, who crafted the signature sound of fellowship, the same sound that would later ripple through choirs across the South, East, and West, ultimately reaching across oceans. Now, let's set the stage. Chicago in the 1960s and 70s was the epicenter of gospel greatness. Mahalia Jackson, Thomas Dorsey, James Cleveland, these names lit up the city's spiritual rhythm. But while many were traveling and recording, Della was rooting something far deeper. She was cultivating a permanent, sacred sound anchored in Black church tradition and community worship, yet fused with modern edge and fearless creativity that few dared to experiment with. At Fellowship, she didn't just lead music, she led generations. From young voices to seasoned mothers of the church, even hard-headed deacons, she shaped them all. She taught her choir to sing with more than skill. She taught them to sing with anointing. Under Della's direction, the Fellowship choir earned a reputation for tight vocal layering, especially three-part harmonies grounded in rich bass lines. They mastered call and response that pulled the whole sanctuary into worship, and most famously, they introduced the world to that unmistakable Chicago bounce woven into traditional gospel rhythms. Anthems, a technique that would go on to shape gospel choirs for generations to come. And let's be clear, this was long before music directors had access to in-ear monitors or digital click tracks. Della was the click track. Her timing set the tone for the entire room. Her hands? They were instruments all on their own. With just a glance, she could silence a section, bring out a soprano run mid-song, or completely rework an arrangement on the spot if the spirit moved. But what set her apart wasn't just her technical brilliance, it was her spiritual sensitivity. Della made it a practice to pray before every rehearsal and insisted that her singers come prepared, not only musically, but spiritually too. Her legendary saying, "If you're not prayed up, you can't sing up." She believed gospel was never meant to be a performance, it was ministry. And that conviction laid the foundation for some of the most unforgettable live worship experiences in Chicago's history. On Sundays, people would travel from across state lines just to sit in the balcony and witness the roar of the Fellowship choir. Under Della's direction, healing happened. Souls were saved. Chains broke in real time. Her arrangements would later go on to inspire the likes of the Chicago Mass Choir, Walt Whitman and the Soul Children of Chicago, and even massive church choirs who used her recordings as study material for rehearsals. But perhaps her most profound impact came through the work no one ever saw. She mentored other choir directors, guiding them behind the scenes to shape their own choirs with that same spirit-filled excellence. She uplifted women who were called to lead in spaces where men still held the reins. And she did all of it quietly, never chasing the spotlight, record deals, or public applause. Yet behind all that strength was a quiet sorrow. Because as the Fellowship choir began to rise to national attention, much of the credit was given solely to Reverend Clay Evans. Outside of Chicago, few people realized that Della was the true architect behind that unmistakable sound. She wasn't on stage, but her fingerprints were on every arrangement. And even still, she kept serving. For Della Evans Reid, it was never about recognition, it was always about the calling. But here's where it gets complicated. Even though she helped mold the sound of gospel for nearly 50 years, she stepped away. She walked away from it all. And the reason why, it may truly surprise you. In the next part, we're going to unpack the season when Della stepped down from the choir stand and what pulled her back years later. With even greater fire, even legends go through quiet seasons. For Della Evans Reid, a name synonymous with gospel excellence, the day she walked away from directing left behind a silence that many still talk about. For nearly 40 years, Della had been the heart and soul behind the music of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church. But in the late 1980s, something shifted. Quietly, without fanfare or farewell, she stepped away from the choir. No grand announcement, no tribute. She was simply gone. But why? Some suggested she was just worn out. Years of relentless directing, rehearsing, traveling, and mentoring had finally taken a toll. Others believed she'd stepped back to focus on family. But those closest to her would later reveal something deeper and heavier. It was burnout. It was grief. It was the weight of ministry. According to people who knew her well, Della had reached a place of spiritual and emotional depletion. From leading community workshops to speaking at women's conferences, from guiding up-and-coming choir directors to hosting gospel fellowships. Right in her own home, Della never stopped pouring into others. She understood something many leaders tend to forget. Legacy isn't just about what you leave behind. It's about who you lived while you're still here. And live she did, thousands of them. She didn't just teach music, she taught purpose. Choir members from her traditional gospel choir of Chicago remember her showing up to rehearsals, even with a cane or walker, and still directing with that same unwavering fire in her eyes. They said that whenever Mother Lou entered the room, something shifted. It wasn't just about singing the notes, right, Dot? She made you want to sing straight to heaven. Others remember her praying over choir members, one by one before performances, laying hands, speaking blessings, and always reminding them of the why behind the worship. In interviews, she often repeated, "We're not singing for the claps, we're singing for the chains to break off somebody," and that's spiritual fire. She kept it burning even into her final days. Well into her 90s, Della was still getting invited to speak, to mentor, to testify. She never backed down from speaking hard truths. To younger choir directors, she'd say, "Y'all got the talent, but do you have the oil?" That simple yet piercing question still echoes among gospel leaders today, and then came her final chapter. One like a psalm, in her last months, Della's health began to fade. But even from her hospital bed, she remained a vessel of intercession, still praying over others. Nurses and staff recalled her softly humming old hymns deep into the night. Songs like, "I Need Thee Every Hour," and "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." One nurse shared a now viral testimony during the late-night visit to check her vitals. Della looked up and gently whispered, "Tell them God never stopped being good." Those were among the final words she ever spoke when she passed peacefully. At the age of 94, surrounded by her loved ones, family, friends, and former choir members, the entire gospel world seemed to pause. Tributes came pouring in from all directions: Chicago Mass Choir, Byron Cage, Ricky Dillard, Shirley Caesar, Vicki Winans, and so many others who had either been led by her directly or touched by her ministry from afar. Church bells rang throughout the city in her honor. Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church held a multi-day homegoing celebration, complete with choir reunions, soul-stirring tributes, and heartfelt memories that showed the truth. Della didn't just leave a mark on gospel music, she left a mark on souls.